Hi, I'm Colleen, and this is my 2023 year in review. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, I talk about books and writing. If you end up liking this video, please subscribe. In the description, I always put links to my newsletter and some of the books I've written. Today, we are going to review 2023. This is an unofficial part 1 to 2-part video. In this one, I'll be talking about the goals and stuff I set for reading and writing this year. We're gonna start with reading. In 2023, I read 85 books, and I wrote down my stats so I wouldn't get them wrong. I read 39 romances, 9 fantasy, 6 magical realism, 9 thrillers or mysteries, 7 lit fic or contemporary fiction, 7 historical fiction, 3 graphic novels, 2 classics, 2 young adult, and 1 nonfiction. With that genre breakdown, some things really surprised me and some things didn't. One, I'm not surprised I read 39 romances. I usually read about half in romance because A, I love romance, B, I am a romance writer, so I like to read in the genre I do write in. The one thing that kind of surprised me is that I only read 9 fantasy, because until recently, I pretty much read 50% romance, 50% fantasy, but I read 6 magical realism because I really got into magical realism this year, which I think kind of elbowed in on my fantasy reads. The rest are pretty par for the course for me, with the exception of reading 2 YA books, because I don't really read YA, but I read 1 in January and 1 in December, so they were very spread out within the year. I didn't have big plans for this year in terms of genre. So in past years, I'd sort of told myself I wanted to broaden my genre reads, and I did a pretty good job. I mean, I read lit fic, I read contemporary fic, I read historical fiction, I read some graphic novels, fantasy, magical realism, romance, lots of thrillers. So I did do a pretty good job reading across the board of different genres that I do read, because I don't read horror, and I don't really read sci-fi. Very occasionally I read a sci-fi book. So I think I did pretty well. The other goals I set for myself was to read under 80 books, and I read 85. So I don't feel terrible about that. The year before I read 99, and I felt very burnt out about the number of books I had read. It had felt like a little too many to try to jam into a year, and so I sort of held back. I'm a very competitive person, so it's not good for me to get close to a milestone 100, because then I'll try to hit it. This year, 2024, I set my Goodreads goal, because I do still use Goodreads. I just think I really want to use Storygraph, but it's just not the interface for me. I set my Goodreads goal at 75, and so I'm hoping that maybe next year I'll even lower my reading, which is a weird thing for a booktuber to say, but I'm not currently in the game of trying to read 200 books a year. I'm just not. One goal I did set for myself that didn't happen, and I know why, and I'll talk about that, is that I wanted to read more big, long books this year. So I told myself I was going to read less books, but longer books. And I did read a few. I think I only read 1 book that was over 500 pages, but I read quite a few books in the 400 to 500 page range. Some were great, some not so much, but I kind of figured out why these books don't work for me as well anymore, whereas they used to totally work for me when I was younger. The main reason is I am a constantly interrupted reader. So yes, I do read before bed, and my husband does interrupt me, but not as much as I get interrupted during the day. But a lot of my reading time is I'm making dinner, and whatever I'm making has to cook for 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm just gonna sit at my kitchen counter and read a couple of chapters. Or I'm outside with my kids, and I'm gonna sit and try to read a chapter before someone interrupts me. And I've noticed that long books tend to have longer chapters. Now, they don't always, but often long books have much longer chapters. And if I'm looking at chapters that are, 15 plus pages, I'm not necessarily going to pick up that book when I'm doing any of these things. I've talked a lot about how summer is my favorite time to read. And this summer really proved that I'm moving into a new stage of motherhood with my children, because I had spent the last few summers, not when they were very little. When they were very little, it's all eyes on all kids at all times, making sure no one's getting hurt. But summer 2020, summer 2021, 2022, I was really able to just we have a gate, lock our gate, and sit by our swing set area where my kids play and just read without interruptions. That didn't really happen at all this summer, because while I would bring books out to read while my kids were playing, We now have the yard that the entire neighborhood wants to come over and play with, which is fine. I love that the neighborhood kids feel welcome in our yard and come play with my kids. And it's easier for me because then I don't have to keep track of where all my children are. They're all just here with all the neighborhood kids. But like, these kids interrupt me constantly when I'm trying to read. So it's much easier to like grab 7 pages of a thriller while before a kid comes and asks me if they can have a glass of water, which happens literally all day long. And I've made my peace with it. It's okay if right now I'm not going to be reading books that are like 400 to 500 pages long. Also, my attention span just isn't great anymore. They always say like mom brain is a thing, but it really is. I've got too much stuff crammed into my brain to concentrate on a lot of like really, really, really long books. And I'm giving myself a pass. It's fine. Short books are great. I love them. So goals 2024, read whatever the heck I want. I'm not forcing myself to read any classics. I'm not forcing myself to read any books that are over 500 pages or whatever. If I want to read one, I will. I'm just going to read what I want. And I'm going to try to read under 75 books. So most likely a year from now, I'll be doing a video and be like, I read 82 books this year. That's where we are. My unofficial part 2 of this video, which is going to come in like a couple days, is going to have my top reads of 2023, all my favorite books. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to hopefully have it out within 5 days of this one coming out. So just subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss it. Now, let's talk about 2023 as a writing year. It was a very exciting writing year for me. I had not indie published a book since 2020. So we all know what life happened. And in 2020, I indie published a book under Lucy Hudson. I indie published my last book I wrote under Lucy Hudson, Good Enough to Eat, which is a Thanksgiving romance that's like forced proximity, friends to lovers, snowed in, sort of fun holiday novella. But then at that point, I decided that I was kind of going to rebuild my author trajectory, which made sense because I had already started writing some paranormal stuff, and I had always kind of pictured myself as a paranormal/fantasy author my whole life. I wrote contemporary for a very short period of time, and it was a nice thing to do because I wrote all my Lucy Hudson books when I had very small children, and trying to world build and keep track of all that stuff was just not something I was able to do. It was much easier for me to set these books, all of them, in places I was very familiar with. And so I didn't have to build worlds. If you've read any of my Lucy Hudson books that take place in Chicago, which is all but one, no, that's not true. All but 2. One of them takes place in Lake Geneva in Wisconsin, which is very close to where I live. I talk about restaurants that exist and places that exist and neighborhoods that exist. And that was kind of nice. But I did, in this last year, start publishing paranormal books, and I released 3. Now, one is The Forest Witch, which is a very short novella. I think it's technically called a novelette because it's 50 pages. It's in my witchy universe, which you're going to see more of in 2024, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And if you don't want to pay for it on Kindle or use KU for it, because it is in KU, you can sign up for my newsletter and get it for free. And it's very cozy, very quick, very spicy. I also released the first 2 books in the Wolves of Luven, Finding His Mate and Waiting for His Mate. And most excitingly, Finding His Mate was my best release ever by far. So that was awesome. That's just like an awesome feeling as an author when you take a left turn and you're really throwing yourself into a new subgenre, which your like soul really wants to write in. To have it be my best release was amazing. The 3rd book in that series is coming out very soon, and I'll put a link in the description to pre-order it. But it just felt really good to write in this genre and to have people enjoy it. And Waiting for His Mate, the 2nd book, I think is my best reviewed book I've ever written. I'm not 100% certain because Something Wicked that I wrote under Lucy Hudson is also very highly rated. But it's up there. It's definitely up there. And that made me so happy. And the reviews I've gotten that book have been so wonderful. I know authors aren't supposed to read reviews, and I try not to, but it's really difficult not to. And I would never, ever in a million years say anything to a reviewer, even like, thank you for the nice review. I just don't do that unless it's someone on my ARC team. And I just would never, like, no, I'm not engaging. But every once in a while I do read the reviews. And in that book, Waiting for His Mate, I took a chance on writing a black cat heroine. So she starts off the story somewhat unlikable, and I wrote a lot of healing from trauma plot lines in that book. And so I had a really nervous feeling releasing it because it was something different than I had written before, and everybody really liked it. I don't think I've gotten a single negative review on that one. Knock on wood. So here's hoping I don't. And here's hoping that everybody loves the third one just as much. For Finding His Mate, I crossed 100 reviews on Goodreads, which is way more than reviews that I've gotten on anything else. I didn't cross 100 until January. So technically, I think I closed out 2003 at 97 reviews. And I'm also getting really close to 100 reviews on Amazon, which is huge for an indie author because it just puts you in a new pool of Amazon promoting you as an author. So if you've read Finding His Mate and you haven't reviewed it on Amazon yet, please do, because I'm getting really close to 100 reviews. It would help me. So this is all to say that 2023 was an extremely successful year for me for writing, and I'm really hoping 2024 will be even more successful. I'm going to do a video probably in February or end of January about what this year is going to look like for me, but I'll give you a quick sneak peek. Watch for Book 3 for The Wolves of Luven, Stealing His Mate, which is already available for pre-order, so it's not a secret. You can read the blurb, you can pre-order it, all that is wonderful. ARCs will be out in a couple weeks, and it'll be out in February. Later in the year, I don't have a hard and fast date yet. Look for Book 4. I'm not telling you the title yet. I'm not telling you who it's about yet. You're gonna have to read Stealing His Mate to get the blurb in the back about who's next. Most excitingly, is I will have my first traditionally published book coming out in 2024, and I can't wait. And I am right now in the throes of crazy editing like I've never done before, which is bananas and exciting and wonderful. And yeah, this is gonna be a good year for me. I've wanted to be traditionally published since I was a child, and I was talking to my husband last night about my publishing journey. I actively queried for a lot of years. So, but with all different books, I actively queried something from ages 24 to 26. And then I actively queried something else from ages 26 to 30. And then I did take a little bit of a break seat from 30 to 35, 36-ish when I started actively querying this book. And now it's going to come out with a traditional publisher, and I'm extremely excited. And also it's a lot for me as an author who has anxiety, because I think we all do. I'm pretty sure every single author has anxiety. Okay, let's wrap up this kind of strange video. 2023 was awesome for writing, great for reading. 2024 is going to be better for writing, maybe better for reading. We'll see. If you are still here and want to let me know in the comments, please tell me what your 2023 looked like. Did you read so much? Did you write so much? Did you write your first book? Did you get a contract? Whatever you might want to tell me, please tell me in the comments. I hope you had a great year. If you want to let me know that you got this far without writing words, give me a stack of books or a pen emoji or both. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you very soon.